It would begin with confusion, not with a dramatic declaration of war, not with speeches on television, and not with soldiers charging across borders. Instead, the first signs would probably appear quietly. Satellite systems failing, military radar suddenly going dark, cyber attacks shutting down banks, airports, and communication networks, internet outages spreading across entire countries. Then within hours, fighter jets would scramble into the sky. Missiles would be placed on alert. Nuclear submarines would disappear beneath the oceans. And millions of people around the world would realize something terrifying. The two most powerful nuclear superpowers on Earth were moving toward direct war. For decades, humanity has feared one nightmare above all others: a full-scale conflict between the United States and Russia. A war so massive it could destroy economies, collapse governments, poison the atmosphere, trigger global famine, and potentially end modern civilization itself. Because unlike previous wars in history, this would not simply be a battle between armies. It would become a war involving satellites, artificial intelligence, cyber attacks, hypersonic missiles, drones, space systems, global markets, energy supplies, and thousands of nuclear weapons capable of wiping entire cities off the map within minutes. And the scariest part? Many military experts believe the world has already experienced several moments where this nightmare nearly happened by accident. So what would actually happen if America and Russia went to war? Who would strike first? Could NATO survive? Would China stay neutral? How long would the world economy last? And what would happen to ordinary civilians trapped in the middle of the largest military conflict in human history? This is the terrifying scenario the world hopes never becomes reality. The war that could change humanity forever. To understand how dangerous this scenario is, we first need to understand why tensions between America and Russia never truly disappeared. After World War II, the United States and the Soviet Union emerged as the two dominant superpowers on Earth. But instead of becoming allies, they became enemies. This rivalry became known as the Cold War. For decades, both sides competed for military dominance, political influence, technological superiority, and global control. The world lived under constant fear of nuclear war. At one point, both nations possessed enough nuclear weapons to destroy humanity several times over. Although the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, tensions with Russia never fully ended. Instead, new conflicts slowly replaced old ones. NATO expansion, military influence in Europe, cyber warfare, energy politics, Ukraine, Syria, sanctions, and competition for global influence. Over time, distrust between Washington and Moscow continued growing. And despite diplomacy, both nations still view each other as strategic threats. That is why even today, military planners on both sides continue preparing for the possibility of war. Because in geopolitics, old rivalries rarely disappear completely. One of the biggest misconceptions about a future America-Russia war is the belief that it would begin intentionally. In reality, many experts fear it could start accidentally. A cyber attack could disable military systems. A missile launch could be misinterpreted. A fighter jet collision near contested airspace could escalate unexpectedly. A regional conflict involving NATO could spiral out of control. Or a misunderstanding during a military crisis could trigger panic on both sides. History already contains terrifying examples. During the Cold War, several false nuclear alarms nearly triggered catastrophic retaliation. In some cases, individual officers prevented disaster by refusing to believe warning systems. But modern warfare moves faster than ever before. Hypersonic missiles can travel at extreme speeds. Cyber attacks can cripple infrastructure instantly. Artificial intelligence systems may influence military decisions. This means leaders could have only minutes to decide whether an attack is real. And under extreme pressure, mistakes become far more likely. If direct conflict began, the first hours would likely focus on speed and paralysis. Both sides would attempt to cripple each other immediately. Cyber warfare would erupt across global networks. Power grids could fail. Banks could shut down. Satellite systems might be targeted. Military communication networks would come under attack. The United States would likely activate NATO defense systems across Europe. Russia would rapidly mobilize troops and missile forces. Air defenses would be placed on maximum alert. Meanwhile, civilians worldwide would experience chaos almost instantly. Financial markets would collapse. Oil prices would explode. Panic buying would begin. Air travel would shut down across large regions. Social media would become flooded with misinformation, fear, and propaganda. And within hours, the world economy could enter freefall. If Russia directly attacked a NATO member, Article 5 of NATO would likely be triggered. This means an attack on one member is considered an attack on all. Suddenly, the conflict would expand far beyond America and Russia alone. Countries like the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Poland, and others could become directly involved. Eastern Europe would become one of the most dangerous regions on Earth. Massive troop mobilizations would occur. Missile systems would spread across borders. The Baltic region could become an immediate flashpoint. At sea, naval battles could erupt in the Atlantic, Arctic, and Mediterranean. And in the air, advanced fighter aircraft and drones would dominate enormous battle zones. This would no longer resemble the wars of the 20th century. It would become a technologically advanced conflict happening simultaneously across land, sea, air, cyber networks, and even outer space. One of the most devastating parts of a modern superpower war may not involve bombs at all. Cyber warfare could cripple modern civilization within days. Electricity systems, water infrastructure, hospitals, transportation, banking, internet systems, emergency communications. Everything connected digitally becomes vulnerable. A successful cyber attack on major infrastructure could create panic even far away from the battlefield. Imagine millions of people suddenly unable to access money. Traffic systems failing in major cities. Hospitals losing access to critical systems. Supply chains collapsing. Food delivery stopping. Modern societies depend heavily on digital infrastructure, and that dependence creates weakness. Some experts believe cyber warfare alone could cause economic devastation comparable to major physical warfare. This is the chapter the world fears most, because any large-scale war between America and Russia carries one terrifying possibility: nuclear escalation. Together, the United States and Russia possess thousands of nuclear warheads. Even a limited nuclear exchange would cause catastrophic destruction. Entire cities could vanish within minutes. Millions could die immediately. Radiation would spread across regions. Global panic would erupt. And if full nuclear war occurred, the consequences could become almost unimaginable. Scientists have long warned about nuclear winter. Massive firestorms from nuclear explosions could send smoke into the atmosphere, blocking sunlight and lowering global temperatures. Agriculture could collapse. Food shortages could spread worldwide. Famine could affect billions. This is why nuclear deterrence exists. Both sides understand that full nuclear war could destroy not only the enemy, but themselves as well. And ironically, this fear may be the main reason such a war has never happened. Even without nuclear weapons, the economic consequences would be catastrophic. The United States and Russia are deeply connected to global energy markets, finance, food exports, and military industries. War would shock the global economy instantly. Oil and gas prices could skyrocket. Stock markets could crash worldwide. International trade routes would become unstable. Shipping costs would surge. Factories could stop production due to shortages. Countries dependent on imported energy or food would suffer severe inflation. Poorer nations could face humanitarian crises. Meanwhile, global investors would flee markets in panic. The financial damage alone could trigger a worldwide depression larger than the 2008 financial crisis. And unlike past recessions, this collapse would happen while governments simultaneously faced military emergencies. One of the biggest questions in this scenario is China. Would China remain neutral, support Russia, or take advantage of global chaos strategically? No one truly knows. China would face enormous pressure. Economically, China depends heavily on global trade stability. A world war would threaten Chinese economic growth. But geopolitically, Beijing might also see opportunities. If America became deeply focused on Europe, tensions in the Pacific could increase dramatically. Taiwan could become a major concern. Meanwhile, China would likely try to avoid direct nuclear confrontation while protecting its own strategic interests. This could create a world divided into competing power blocks. And once global alliances begin hardening during wartime, diplomacy becomes far more difficult. The greatest tragedy of war is always human suffering, and a conflict between America and Russia could produce humanitarian crises on a scale the modern world has never seen. Millions of refugees could flee war zones. Major cities could experience shortages of food, medicine, electricity, and clean water. Civilian panic would spread rapidly. Governments may impose emergency laws. Border security would tighten globally. Meanwhile, misinformation and fear could intensify social instability inside many countries. Mental health crises would surge. Families would become separated, and ordinary civilians, far removed from political decisions, would suffer the consequences most severely. This depends entirely on how far the conflict escalates. A limited conventional war would already leave enormous global scars. Economic collapse, political instability, destroyed infrastructure, long-term distrust between nations. But if nuclear weapons were used extensively, recovery could take generations, or may never fully happen at all. Entire regions could become uninhabitable. Global agriculture could collapse temporarily. International systems may disintegrate, and humanity could enter one of the darkest periods in modern history. That is why preventing direct war between nuclear superpowers remains one of the most important goals in global politics. Because once such a conflict begins, controlling it may become impossible. If war erupted between America and Russia, control of the skies would become one of the most important objectives in the first days of fighting. Modern warfare depends heavily on air superiority. Without it, troop movements become vulnerable. Supply chains collapse. Communication systems weaken. And military operations slow dramatically. The United States possesses one of the most advanced air forces in human history. Stealth bombers, F-22 Raptors, F-35 fighter jets, massive aerial refueling capabilities, global surveillance systems. Meanwhile, Russia maintains powerful air defense systems designed specifically to challenge Western air power. Systems like the S-400 and advanced radar networks were built to prevent enemy aircraft from dominating Russian-controlled airspace. This means the skies over Europe could become one of the deadliest battle zones on Earth. Massive aerial combat operations could unfold daily. Drones would swarm across contested regions. Electronic warfare aircraft would attempt to blind enemy radar systems. Satellites would monitor every movement from orbit. And unlike older wars, many attacks might happen before civilians even realized combat had begun. Because in modern warfare, the speed of information can be more deadly than bullets. One terrifying reality rarely discussed publicly is that a future superpower war would almost certainly extend into outer space. Modern militaries depend heavily on satellites. GPS navigation, military communications, missile detection systems, weather monitoring, drone coordination, banking systems, internet infrastructure. All of these rely on space technology. If America and Russia entered direct conflict, satellites could become immediate targets. Anti-satellite missiles might destroy communication networks. Cyber attacks could disable orbital systems. Military forces could suddenly lose navigation and intelligence capabilities. The consequences for civilians would also be catastrophic. Navigation apps could fail. Global communications could become unstable. Financial systems could malfunction. Transportation networks could collapse. Human civilization today depends far more on space technology than most people realize. And once space becomes a battlefield, modern society itself becomes vulnerable. In almost every military scenario involving Russia and NATO, Europe becomes the primary battlefield, especially Eastern Europe. Countries near Russia's borders would face enormous danger immediately. Poland, the Baltic states, Romania, Finland. These regions could experience troop buildups, missile deployments, and massive military operations within days. Millions of civilians might attempt to flee westward. Railways, highways, and airports would become overwhelmed. Governments would activate emergency wartime systems. At the same time, European economies could collapse under the pressure of energy shortages, panic, and military mobilization. Some countries might even reintroduce mandatory military service during the crisis. And as fear spread across Europe, memories of World War II would return psychologically for millions of people. Because for decades, Europe has lived in relative peace. A direct NATO-Russia war would shatter that stability overnight. One region becoming increasingly important in global military strategy is the Arctic. As ice melts due to climate change, new shipping routes and natural resources are becoming accessible. Russia has heavily expanded its Arctic military presence in recent years. Military bases, missile systems, submarine operations, air defense networks. Meanwhile, NATO countries are also increasing Arctic operations. Why? Because the Arctic provides strategic access for submarines carrying nuclear missiles. And in a superpower war, nuclear submarines may become among the most important weapons on Earth. These submarines can remain hidden underwater for long periods while carrying devastating nuclear payloads. This creates a terrifying reality. Even if one country's land-based systems were destroyed, submarine fleets could still launch retaliation. That is why military planners consider the Arctic one of the most strategically dangerous regions in the world today. Wars are not fought only with weapons. They are fought psychologically. And in a modern global conflict, fear itself could become one of the deadliest forces. Imagine waking up and discovering banks are offline, internet access is unstable, stores are empty, fuel is unavailable. Military alerts are appearing on phones. News reports contradict each other constantly. Rumors spread faster than facts. People begin panicking. This psychological pressure could destabilize societies rapidly. Crime may increase. Political extremism could rise. Public trust in governments might collapse. Mental health crises would spread globally. Even countries not directly involved in the fighting would feel the emotional effects of fear and uncertainty. Because modern societies are deeply interconnected, and once fear spreads digitally, it moves faster than governments can control. One of the least discussed dangers of a superpower war is food insecurity. Russia and Ukraine are major exporters of grain and fertilizer. The United States is also a critical agricultural power. If global trade routes became disrupted during war, food supplies across many countries could collapse quickly. Shipping routes may become dangerous. Ports could shut down. Fuel shortages could impact farming equipment and transportation. Prices for wheat, rice, and basic goods could skyrocket. Poorer nations would suffer first. Millions of people could face hunger within months. And if nuclear weapons were used, the agricultural consequences could become catastrophic. Smoke from nuclear explosions could reduce sunlight globally, damaging crop production. This is one reason scientists fear nuclear war could trigger worldwide famine far beyond the countries directly attacked. Modern warfare is no longer limited to physical battlefields. The internet itself could become a war zone. Governments might censor information heavily. Social media platforms could be flooded with propaganda and fake videos. Artificial intelligence might generate false speeches, fake military announcements, or manipulated footage designed to create panic. Meanwhile, hackers on all sides would target infrastructure constantly. Data centers, government systems, communication networks, transportation systems. Everything connected digitally becomes vulnerable. The truth itself could become difficult to identify. And during wartime, confusion becomes a weapon. This creates one of the greatest dangers of modern conflict. People may no longer know what information is real. Even without nuclear weapons, a major war between America and Russia would create severe environmental damage. Oil facilities could burn. Factories could explode. Chemical plants might leak toxins. Forests could be destroyed by bombardment. Air pollution would spread across regions. Oceans could become contaminated from naval warfare. If nuclear facilities were damaged during attacks, radioactive contamination could spread beyond borders. And if nuclear weapons were used directly, environmental destruction could reach historic levels. Entire ecosystems might collapse. Some regions could remain unsafe for decades. Future generations would inherit the damage long after the war ended. Because war does not only destroy people, it destroys the environment civilizations depend on to survive. Even during war, diplomacy would remain critical. Secret negotiations would likely continue behind closed doors. Neutral countries may attempt mediation. The United Nations would face enormous pressure to prevent escalation. Military hotlines between Washington and Moscow would become extremely important. Why? Because during moments of extreme tension, communication itself can prevent catastrophe. One misunderstood missile launch, one radar error, one accidental strike. Any of these could push both sides toward irreversible escalation. History has shown multiple examples where diplomacy narrowly prevented disaster during the Cold War. And if future leaders remain calm under pressure, diplomacy may once again become humanity's final line of defense. If humanity survived such a conflict, the world afterward would likely look completely different. Global trust between nations would collapse. Military alliances would reshape. Economic systems could fragment into competing blocks. Technology would become more militarized. Governments may increase surveillance and security powers dramatically. Entire generations would grow up traumatized by the fear and destruction of war. And humanity itself would face a difficult question. Could civilization continue surviving in a world where superpowers remain capable of destroying the planet within hours? That question may define the future of the 21st century, because the true danger of a war between America and Russia is not simply military destruction. It is the possibility that human civilization could permanently change afterward. A war between America and Russia would not resemble the wars of the past. It would move faster, spread wider, destroy deeper, and affect nearly every human being on Earth in some way. The battlefield would not exist only in cities or deserts. It would exist online, in space, inside financial systems, across energy networks, inside the minds of billions of frightened civilians. And hanging over everything would be the shadow of nuclear weapons. For decades, the world has survived largely because global leaders understood one terrifying truth. Some wars cannot truly be won, only survived. And perhaps that is the most important lesson of all. Because if humanity ever reaches the point where America and Russia enter direct total war, the real question may no longer be who wins, but whether the modern world itself survives at all.